Good morning. This is the 10:30 presentation of Light and Health. It is more than tunable white light. Hopefully everybody's in the correct room. Great. A couple of housekeeping pieces. At the end of the seminar, or at the end of the presentation, there are sign-up sheets outside on the table for your AIA credits. If you have an AIA number, put it in. If not, it would be emailed to you based on the registration. I know some of you still haven't gotten your badges yet, but we're working on that also. But anyway, welcome to LEDucation. Second item is we want to always keep up the high quality of presentations that we've become known for at LEDucation. So at some point, if you would go to leducation.org, there is an online evaluation. Fortunately, I am not listed, but the presenters are, and you can check off, I hope, great evaluations for everybody, if that makes sense. At any rate, I'm Gary Mann, New Gen Lighting. I'm a manufacturer's rep agent. Has nothing to do with anything here, but I'm on the LEDucation organizing committee, which you blame me for the registration lines. At any rate, again, Light and Health, it is more than tunable white light. Our presenter today is Dr. Mariana Figueroa. She is the Light and Health Program Director at the Lighting Research Center. Most of you are familiar with the LRC at Rensselaer Polytech. She is a professor at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute also. Dr. Figueroa conducts research on the effect of light on human health, circadian photobiology, and lighting for older adults. She holds a bachelor's in architectural engineering, a master's in lighting, and a doctorate in multidisciplinary science. She's the recipient of the 2007 NISTAR James D. Watson Award, the 2008 Office of Naval Research Young Investigator Award, and the 2010 Rensselaer James M. 1066 Early Career Award. In 2013, Dr. Figueroa was elected Fellow of the Illuminating Engineering Society. That's it?
That's it? That's as much as I can give.
I gotta talk to my kids. Please welcome Dr. Mariana Figueroa.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. Gary, thanks for inviting me. It was very kind. So I'll talk a little bit about the overview of Light and Health and the work we've been doing. Yes, it is more than tunable white lights. Hopefully that's what you're going to learn. And I'm going to wag my finger at you guys because you're not applying some of these principles and applications because it's a shame. So you'll see me mad because you guys are not doing it. If you visit any nursing home or assisted living facility in the country, you should look at your shoes and pretend that you're not a lighting designer because it's a shame, and we need to do better than that. So hopefully that talk will give you power and sort of motivation to do better than what we've been doing, at least for older people, but for other populations too. So I guess I have to go through this AIA thing, and I guess you have to put your number outside or else you won't get your credits, whoever's here just for the credits. So get that information. You can fall asleep and wake up at the end. And then there's the course description and the learning objectives. Hopefully you'll learn something at the end. But like I said, if anything, you're going to learn that we need to improve the lighting in at least older people's facilities. All right, so let's start with just the general overview. Those of you who have seen me speak have seen this graphic for a long time. It actually, we put together this idea of lighting affecting the three systems many, many years ago, probably in the 1990s. Mark Ray and Peter Boyce put that idea together, and since then it kind of has been guiding us on the work we're doing. Because lighting does affect more than allowing us to see. It also affects what we call our non-visual systems, which is really how it impacts our circadian rhythms. And it also sends a message. And a lot of what you do as designers, it's really sending a message of that you care, or the space is nice, or that it's cheap, or that it's an expensive place. So there's a lot of things that can be done with lighting just sending pure message of what lighting is. So a lot of the focus on the presentation will be on the non-visual systems, but I don't want you to think that that's the only thing that matters, okay? This is just another part of the equation, and it's something else, unfortunately, you need to think about from now on. Are you going to get paid more for that? Probably not. Sorry to tell you. It's one more thing you need to worry about, but that doesn't mean you're getting paid more. But I think it's an important area, and hopefully you will see some of the results we're getting in the field, and you'll get more motivated to, even if you don't get paid more, take into account that non-visual effects of light. Okay? So in terms of the visual effects, I mean, the way we've been looking at it's really separating lighting into its characteristics, which is the amount, the spectrum, the distribution, the timing, and the duration, and how it affects visual system, circadian system, and the perceptual system. So in terms of the visibility, there are what we call models of relative visual performance, okay? And a lot of what we know from the IES handbook, it's really looking at understanding what the visual size is, what the luminance contrast, what the retinal illuminance, and we can calculate what the visibility will be. And I can tell you, for most of the IES recommendations that we have today, you're going to fall right at the plateau of this model. So in other words, visibility will probably not be an issue. People will be able to perform the visual tasks if you follow the IES recommendations, okay? And that's really what we've been doing. It's allowing people to see what they need to see in the space. Obviously, being able to see, it's not the only important thing. We care a lot about the appearance of the space, okay? How the space look and how bright the space looks. And sometimes brightness perception can be different than being able to read a black font on white paper, for example. We are vertical species. We really are looking for vertical surfaces being illuminated. And those of you who are designers, you know that. You think about how I'm going to light the walls, how I'm going to make the space appear brighter. The other thing that we know is if you change color temperature, for the same amount of lux level at the eye, a 6500K light source will be about 20-25%, will look about 20-25% brighter. So there's a trick there. Maybe if energy is a concern, you could use a high correlated color temperature light source and drop a little bit the light level, and the space will still appear brighter, but you're not using as much energy, for example. And we have done at the LRC some work looking at, you know, maybe changing light in the indoor environment, reducing light levels, and changing the spectrum to account for the brightness perception. Same thing with outdoors. That's another technique that can be used with outdoors, okay? Now, this is not going to change performance. It's going to change just your appearance of how bright the space looks, okay? Obviously, for visibility, we care about controlling for glare, for reflections, for shadows. This is very important. I mean, comfort and the ability of not to hinder the task that we want to do can be done by good lighting design, okay? And we think about that all the time when we're doing the design. Well, in addition, and I think that's something that we all care about as designers, is we care about the message, okay? So we show this. These are 2 newborn intensive care units. And obviously, if you're going to put your premature baby there, you probably, maybe the care on that one is much better than the care on that one. But when you come in the environment, you're probably going to want your baby to be on the one below than you will want on the one above, because just the first impression matters, okay? So how we do the lighting in the space, what message we want to send matters. We, some time ago, talked to Walmart, and we wanted to help, you know, when we first started talking about LEDs, and especially with refrigerator cases, we've done a lot of work with that. And the people at Walmart said, well, we really don't want to change it because we don't want to look like it's expensive. Because you put this fancy lighting system, it looks like it's expensive. That's not our value proposition. So lighting can give that sort of dimension to the space that if we know how to use it, it makes a big difference. Okay? So we can't really lose sight of that. In addition, you have some of the work that's been done looking at the biophilia hypothesis, which is really, you know, that need that we have to have a contact with the external environment. and how lighting can make you feel in the space, more of the psychological effect. So lighting can make people feel better or worse in the space. And some would argue that if I feel better in the space, I'm going to perform better. I do have to say linking light to productivity has been sort of the holy grail of the lighting industry. Everybody's trying to do that. It's very hard to measure productivity. So if I were you, I would go on to different directions that are probably easier to show and demonstrate the effect than trying to show light's effect on productivity. But nevertheless, the perceptual system and the psychological systems are very important as well. And then we have, of course, the non-visual systems. And within the non-visual system, we sort of split into two parts. One is what we call the phase shifting effect. So it's really the ability of light to maintain us and train with the local time on Earth, or the ability of the light-dark pattern to phase shift our biological clock when we travel, say, from here to California or from here to Europe, okay? This is what phase shifting is. It's phase shifting the time of our biological rhythms. And light-dark patterns are the strongest synchronizer or the strongest stimulus to lead to that phase shift. And then we have what we call the acute alerting effects. These acute alerting effects may result in a phase shifting, but may not. Think about lighting as a cup of coffee. You can use light to keep you alert and awake without necessarily phase shifting the timing of your sleep, for example. Okay, so light serves these two purposes. So one of the things that I talk to people a lot is saying, you need morning light to maintain your entrainment, to maintain you synchronized with your watch. But all you need is half an hour of a certain amount of light in the morning. So if you go for a run in the morning and daybreak, you're fine. But if you come back and you're in a dim light, in a dim office all day long, you're very well entrained, but you're going to be sleepy, because there's something about that light during the day that increases your alertness, makes you less sleepy during the day, okay? So you have to think about the two systems and how you're going to design the space to meet the needs of those two systems, okay? And that's what we're going to be talking in a little bit more detail. So what are circadian rhythms? Circadian rhythms are every rhythm in our body that repeats at approximately every 24 hours. Circ is about, D is a day. Okay, so examples of circadian rhythms: the sleep-wake cycle. We're supposed to be awake during the day, asleep at night. Hormone production, alertness, performance. All of these things go through these patterns that has peaks and troughs, and they repeat every day over the course of many days. Okay, and circadian rhythms are regulated and generated by a biological clock in the brain. It's called suprachiasmatic nuclei, or SCN. If you're in a dark cave, you're going to continue to have circadian rhythms. They're going to continue to run. The difference is that they're going to run with a period slightly greater than 24 hours. On average in humans, about 24.2 hours. And that's where entrainment comes in. Because if I don't have entrainment, every day I'm going to be 10, 15 minutes delayed from my watch. So my alarm clock will say 8 o'clock, and my biological clock is saying it's 7:45, I want to sleep another 15 minutes. Tomorrow it's going to say it's 7:30, and I want to sleep another half an hour. The following day it's 7:15, and I want to sleep another 45 minutes. You know where I'm going with that, right? So if you're in a dark room and you don't get that signal, you don't have that entrainment, okay? So light-dark patterns, every day when you get up and you get light, that light resets your biological clock, so that now you're running with a period of 24 rather than 24.2 hours. Okay, so that alone is important. And that alone is enough for us to think about either changing what we do when we get up. So if you don't go for a walk or run outdoors, think about doing that. Or if you have to drive in the dark to work, you got to figure out what you're going to do in your cubicle or in your office to be able to maintain that entrainment or give that pulse of light, okay? Now, if we don't get enough light, especially the morning light, or if we get too much light at the wrong time, which could be in the middle of the night, which could be sitting in front of a computer in the evening before going to bed, which could be turning on bright lights or watching a hockey game in the evening because you have a kid that wants to go to a hockey game, light can also be the major disruptor, okay? So circadian disruption is very detrimental to health. There's a lot of work that's been done. That's solid science. I can't even list all the references that we have, showing that circadian disruptions is linked to poor sleep, poor performance, and high stress. Those of you who have gone through a pulled an all-nighter, you know how miserable you are the following day, but that's okay. You did it once. The following night, you sleep for 10 hours, you recover, and you're fine. But if you're a shift worker where you're doing this 3 times a week, every week for 20, 30 years, you're at higher risk for cancer, for example. So if you do that for it's been shown that for 5 days, if you sleep 5 hours instead of 8 hours, which has more to do with sleep deprivation than circadian disruption, but circadian disruption may lead to sleep deprivation. So if you're sleeping 5 hours a night instead of 8 hours a night, you become pre-diabetic, you eat more, and you gain weight. So I always tell them I'm going to be really rich when I tell people that light can make you skinny. That's the best thing in the world. I'm going to have to stop writing proposals. If once I show that, I'm all set. But there are very, very negative consequences of circadian disruption, leading to also sleep disruption or sleep curtailment. So when you start thinking about the non-visual effects and the lighting characteristics affecting that, we need to start understanding, well, what kind of light is important for the circadian system, where it's maximally effective for the circadian system? Because, of course, we care about energy, we care about beautifying the environment, we care about visibility, and now we have to care about what light I give people. So if I don't care about anything else, just give me blue light, okay? Peak sensitivity of the circadian system, 460 nanometers, okay? I don't have time to go into the detail of how we developed these spectral sensitivity functions, but you see there's a blue curve and a red curve. That represents more how the circadian system works. The blue curve would be for more of a cooler light source when you have more short wavelength or blue in the light source. The red curve is for warmer color light sources, and then the black one is where your photopic luminance efficiency function is. So that black curve is what's used to calculate your lux levels that you measure with your light meter, okay? Which is very different than the spectral sensitivity of the circadian system. Circadian system is a blue sky detector. It's looking for blue sky. Now, many of you may have heard about melanopic lux, and so on. So I'll just briefly talk about that. Circadian system uses rods, cones, which are the classical photoreceptors, as well as the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cell, which is a photoreceptive system that was discovered in 2002. This photoreceptive system has melanopsin, which is an opsin that gives that photoreceptor its photosensitivity, okay? That peaks at 480 nanometers. The circadian system peaks at shorter wavelengths at around 460 nanometers. So short wavelength cones contributes to the spectral sensitivity of the circadian system. In fact, all 3 classes of photoreceptors. So designing just for melanopsin response is actually wrong. And I don't recommend doing it because it's been shown, many other studies have been shown and published for that. If anybody wants more information, I'm happy to go through it in details. In terms of the absolute sensitivity, so what we do with these spectral response functions that you see here, we can calculate what we call circadian light. What circadian light is light that is effective for the circadian system as measured by acute melatonin suppression. Melatonin is a hormone we produce at night and in darkness, and light will suppress melatonin, okay? So melatonin is a very nice, it's very used as a marker of the circadian clock because it's very easy to measure. We can measure it in plasma and saliva and in urine. And light will cease melatonin production at night, okay? And blue light is the most effective one. So you need very low light levels of blue to activate the circadian system. So perhaps that's why you're hearing people say, oh, you need the tunable light sources because you need to go to 6,500K or 5,000K during the day and then 2,700K in the evening. True, you can get some beneficial effect of having high correlated color temperature light sources, but I'll show you that CCT is not the right metric, and you shouldn't be thinking about CCT when you're doing lighting for the circadian system. So with circadian light, we can then calculate what we call circadian stimulus, and I'll go into a little bit more detail of what circadian stimulus is and how you calculate. But this is what we call a transfer function that gives you from threshold to saturation, how the circadian system would be impacted for different light sources. So this is just to give you an idea. A daylight light source, like a 6500K light source or an incandescent light source, at the same lux level at the eye, you have a little bit of a benefit of using a daylight light source because you have a little bit more sensitivity to that light. But it's not a big deal. It's just a small difference, okay? But that gives you an idea. Outdoor light levels are probably below threshold for activating the circadian system. So there's a lot of hype about outdoor lighting, a lot of hype about the AMA report and so on. Well, the question we need to ask ourselves is it above threshold? Are we getting enough light to suppress melatonin at night from street lights? If we are, okay, now let's talk about spectrum, and let's see at the different spectral power distributions which light source will suppress or will not suppress melatonin. Okay, but first of all, you got to be above threshold. That's the first question that you should ask yourself. And then the other side of the spectrum is at saturation. 1,000 lux or 5,000 lux won't make any difference. You're way up there on the curve, so why spend the energy and put 5,000 lux? Let's just do the minimum you need to be able to have a decent amount of activation of the circadian system. So what we've been proposing, and I'll show you some data on that, is to use a circadian stimulus of 0.3, which is halfway on that curve, which would be equivalent to a 30% melatonin suppression after 1 hour exposure to that light source, okay? And we're showing in the field that actually has benefits in sleep and mood in different populations. Now, in addition to amount and spectrum, timing is also very important. The same amount of light in the morning is beneficial. If you give it in the middle of the night, it's not going to be beneficial. The same spectrum, the same amount. When you give becomes very important, okay? So we do know that morning light helps us go to bed earlier and wake up earlier. Evening light delays the time of your sleep. So sitting in front of a computer, being exposed to too bright light in the evening for long periods of time may delay the timing of your sleep, okay? Now, the other thing that we're learning with the research we're doing is that every photon counts. If I just get morning and evening light and I don't take into account what I get in the middle of the day, I am not able to predict the effect of that light on my circadian system. I need to know from the time I get up to the time I go to bed how much light I'm getting. Your circadian clock is summing up the light at different times of day and giving you a net result. So when you're doing the design, you need to do the design not just for morning, not just for afternoon, not just for evening. You need to do it complete design. So we talk about schools, for example. You can do beautiful circadian lighting in schools, but if the kid goes home and gets into a hockey game or expose himself or herself to really, really bright computer screens, they may be messing up what you did during the day. So you need to let parents know what to do in the evening in order to maintain or to get the most benefit of the lighting you're doing in the environment, okay? So our working hypothesis is that a tailored lighting intervention that is designed to promote circadian entrainment can improve sleep, mood, and behavior in various populations. We're also looking at adding as sort of layers of light where you also give that cup of coffee. So you also increase that alerting effect. Excuse me. And that alerting effect is going to be different during the day and at night for night shift workers, for example. You need to change the type of lighting that you're giving for these two populations. So there are these different populations that light has been shown to have an effect. And obviously for day shift and night shift workers, you can add another layer which is looking at promoting alertness in addition to promoting, entrainment. So what we're doing here is we're using the CS as sort of a metric, okay? what CS does, it takes into account the absolute and the spectral sensitivity. It does not take into account the duration because CS only assumes an hour exposure. So yes, it could be that if you're exposed to that light for 8 hours, you can reduce the amount because you're being exposed to for longer durations. We don't have that trade-off yet. I don't think anybody has done extensive work on that. So we use the minimum, which is an hour, of a circadian stimulus of about 0.3, which would be halfway on that curve. Why not 0.7 all the way up in the curve? It would be great, but that means you're going to spend more energy, and we have to be aware of that. That means that the room may be brighter, and people may not like the room that bright. So the 0.3, it's kind of a compromise where you're giving that circadian stimulation, but you're also taking into account other things you need to worry about when you're doing your design. So here are some considerations when using circadian stimulus, okay? You have to think about vertical illuminance, light at the plane of the cornea, okay? We tend to think of horizontal illuminance. Horizontal illuminance doesn't mean anything for the circadian system, okay? So we have to start thinking about vertical illuminance. So if you're doing your AGI calculation, make sure you put a vertical point where people are sitting or where people are going to be spending most of their time. You have to take into account light level, spectrum, the timing and the duration of exposure, and the photic history. What's the total amount of light that people are being exposed to? So our hypothesis is that a CS of 0.3 is effective at stimulating the circadian system. So we have developed this calculator, and you can download it for free. The calculator, what you do is you can select the light source up there. We have populated some SPDs, but you can also input your own SPDs. And then you put the light level at the eye, whatever you calculate with your AGI, and then it will calculate what the circadian stimulus is. And note that you have the two curves there, and it will tell you what curve is being used, depend on the spectral power distribution of the light source that you're using. So again, one of the considerations is light at the cornea. So now the distribution of the fixture you're using becomes important. And one of the things that we're learning is you want to have light everywhere you're looking, okay? So direct and indirect luminaires tend to give you that better ratio of horizontal and vertical illuminance. Okay, they're better than just recessed downlights. They're better than just indirect. They tend to give you more light at the vertical plane if you use things like direct, indirect light sources. But even within direct, indirect, there are different ratios, and there are fixture types that are better than others. So you will need to use AGI, play with the fixtures, to be able to increase that ratio between horizontal and vertical so you can get most of the light at the eye. One of the things that I think it's important to remember is, yes, you can reduce the light levels if you use spectral power distribution light sources that tend to have more power at shorter wavelengths, okay, and more bluish-white light sources. But you can maintain the same correlated color temperature. And we work a lot with manufacturers, and the manufacturers are getting really smarter now. They're playing with the phosphor base, where you don't need to have a 5,000 K or a high correlated color temperature. Even with a 3,000 K, 3,500 K, you can probably mix the spectrum so you get good circadian stimulation, okay? So the key here is you don't have to change CCT, you can just change light levels, okay? And the second thing is you need to ask for the spectral power distribution. Whoever is a manufacturer in the room, get used to it, because everybody's going to start asking for it. And whoever is doing the design, ask for the SPD. Don't ask just for the CCT, okay? And this is why, I don't know if you can see, this table is probably too small, but we looked at different LEDs at 3,000 K and at 3,500 K. So you would think, well, 3,500 K will give you more circadian stimulation because it's a higher CCT. Well, when we do the calculations, and by the way, all these tables and those lookup tables, they're all on our website, so we did it for different SPDs. But here's the horizontal illuminance. You get here from 300 to 500, and then you have the different manufacturers. And we bolded the ones that got to a CS of 0.3 at these light levels. So you get a lot more manufacturers. In fact, you get no manufacturers at 3,500 K that reaches the CS of 0.3. Now, that's because there is an intransitivity in how the circadian system responds due to your color vision. I'm not going to get into detail of that, But anybody who wants additional explanation, we have like 6 or 7 papers we publish. If you're willing to read, be my guest. I'll be happy to send it to you guys, but I figured you guys wouldn't be interested in a lot of equations here. But it has to do with your color vision and spectral opponency due to the B- wide channel in your retina. So it has to do with how your eye works. So there's a reason for it. But the fact is that if you play with the spectral power distribution, the same CCT can give you very different circadian stimulation, okay? And we, in fact, just collected data. We're gonna have results in the next month or so, comparing a 4,000K with a 3,000K, where we're predicting to have more suppression with a meltdown suppression with a 3,000K than we are predicting to have with the 4,000K. Now that would be very interesting to see. So let's see if we get the results we're hypothesizing we're gonna get. Now, obviously, you also need to come up with a control schedule. So those of you doing controls, that's probably your time. Your time has come, because I think controls will become very important in this area. You need to give and remove light at the right time. And you can keep the same circadian stimulus of CS of 0.3 all day long, but if energy is a constraint, you can keep it in the morning, drop a little bit in the afternoon, and drop it to below threshold, about 0.1 or less in the evening, to minimize circadian stimulation in the evening. So you maintain that light-dark patterns that we need. Okay, so you need to make sure that when you're specifying lighting for the circadian system, you just don't specify CCT, because CCT doesn't mean anything, but you specify the light level, you specify the spectral power distribution. If you want to use circadian stimulus, I recommend, because we're seeing success with that, and I'll show you some data. But you also need to specify time. When do I get a circadian stimulus of what at what time, okay? Morning CS, you gotta keep it at 0.3 or higher. That's your entraining stimulus. If you need to drop it, I recommend you do things like task lamps or more targeted lights to increase that acute alertness, and I'll show you some ideas that we've been working with on that. So here are our working hypotheses, is that the circadian stimulation greater than 0.3 during the day and less than 0.1 in the evening, to give that contrast to the circadian system, promotes entrainment in different populations. So this is work that we have been doing with General Service Administration. We've been working with them for the past 3 years now. And we started with simply collecting data in office workers, okay? So what are office workers being exposed to in terms of circadian stimulation? And what does that mean in terms of their sleep and mood? So we were basically collecting objective sleep measures through actigraphy. We're collecting subjective sleep quality, asking them how well they slept, and looking at PSQI, which is a sleep quality questionnaire, and we were asking them about depression, okay, how depressed they were, how stressed they were. And we collected data over 120 office workers during the summer and during the winter months. And we separated them by those who were exposed to a high circadian stimulus, which is circadian stimulus of 0.3 or higher, or a low circadian stimulus, which is circadian stimulus of 0.15 or lower, very close to threshold, okay? And what we saw is the first graph is sleep disturbances. There was a significant increase in sleep disturbances in those who received low circadian stimulus during the day compared to those who received high circadian stimulus. The second one is depression scores. Those receiving low circadian stimulus during the day were reporting being more depressed than those receiving high circadian stimulus during the day. And the third graph is another sleep quality scale. So those receiving high circadian stimulus reported having better sleep quality than those receiving low circadian stimulus, okay? So clearly, daytime light, how much light you're getting during the day, is affecting how you're gonna sleep at night, okay? So one of the things that I've been telling people, we talk a lot about light at night. We talk a lot about our computers, which, you know, we should dim it down, we should turn it off, no question about it. But what about light during the day? We are being exposed to way too little light during the day. We're so concerned about energy, which I'm all for. I don't think anybody should waste energy, but there's a limit. And I think we need to start thinking about how do we improve daytime light? Because if you're exposed to higher light levels during the day, you're actually less sensitive to the light at night. So that's actually a benefit to increasing the amount of light during the day. Again, think about day, evening, anytime you're awake. That's what you have to think about. Just don't think about part of the day, because you're going to do half of the job. You're not going to do the complete job. Adolescents. I think I mentioned schools. We did this study with the USGBC in 2010, and that was really looking at the hypothesis that lack of circadian entrainment would affect sleep and performance in kids in school. So we did this work in North Carolina, Smith Middle School. It's a beautiful school with a lot of daylight. So what we did is we actually removed the daylight from the poor kids. So we gave them orange glasses, and they were wearing orange glasses from the time they got up until the time they left school. So we basically put them in circadian darkness, because it's sort of a bad way to do it, but we were trying to prove our case. And we performed 3 field studies, and what we showed in 2 of them in North Carolina was that by removing that morning light in the kids, they delayed their dim light melatonin onset, which is the timing in the evening where melatonin starts rising, and you typically go to bed about a couple of hours after that. So if you delay the timing you start producing melatonin in the evening, you delay your sleep time. And that's bad for teenagers, because they have to wake up at a fixed time. The school bus is down at the door at a certain time. So what we showed is for 1 week, just 1 week of removing that morning light, we delayed their dim light melatonin onset by 30 minutes. Now think about winter. When they go to work or they go to school in the dark, they don't get any light, and they are in these crummy schools where they don't have enough light to promote their entrainment, okay? So that can happen for 2 months out of the winter months at a minimum. So giving them enough light to maintain entrainment in the morning is important for kids in school. Now, the other thing that it's important, as I said, you have to control evening light. We did a study with self-luminous displays, and what we showed was for the same amount of circadian stimulus at the eye compared to 20, 30-year-old people, teenagers suppress twice as much melatonin than their counterparts at 20, 30 years old. So it does seem like when you're in a range of 15 to 17 years of age, you're more sensitive to evening light. So minimizing that evening light is just as important as giving them good morning light to maintain entrainment. Okay. We have also been working with premature infants. We're working with Dr. White in South Bend, Indiana. He's a great neonatologist and very interested in bringing research into the unit. So there has been a lot of work showing that cycled light, where you have higher circadian stimulation during the day, lower circadian stimulation in the evening, that helps premature infants entrain better to their home environment when they leave home. In some cases, it reduces number of days in ventilator, it increases weight gain, and it improves sleep overall in not only the baby but also the mother. So it's overall, they agree that babies over 32 weeks should be in this cycle light, should not be in constant darkness. Now, if you work with NICUs, you know that the nurses, what they tend to do is they tend to put a blanket on top of the incubator, right? Because they feel like the baby can't have all that bright light and so on. So we developed this baby blanket where it's basically something you can put on top of the incubator, and then the blanket can go on top of it. That has a camera, so you can basically see the baby from under the blanket. And it also has a cycle light, so we provide that high circadian stimulation. And it has also an examination light. So we did some preliminary work. It seems like it works, but we're university-based. We're not really manufacturers or commercial entities, so we never really move forward with commercializing this. Hopefully somebody will one day. Now that's when I wag my finger at you all guys. Now it's the time. I knew you were looking forward to that moment, so here it is. Circadian entrainment in people with dementia, okay? I don't know if you know anybody with Alzheimer's, but unfortunately Alzheimer's and cancer, it's one of those things. You're always gonna know somebody at some point in your lifetime. And One of the things with Alzheimer's patients is they are as likely to be awake as they are to be asleep. They don't have a consolidated sleep during the nighttime. They sleep for 3 hours, they're awake for 4 hours, they sleep again for 2 hours, they're awake again for 3 hours. This is very hard on caregivers, and it's in fact one of the main reasons why they are institutionalized, okay? So since in the 1990s, Usman Sommering in the Netherlands published a beautiful study where he showed that if he gave 1,100 lux at the eye during the day to Alzheimer's patients and lower light levels in the evening, he was able to consolidate their sleep so that they were asleep from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. instead of asleep for 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. So he was able to consolidate their sleep into the nighttime and maintain them more awake during the day. So knowing that the circadian system is maximally sensitive to short wavelengths, we said, well, why don't we do a tailored lighting intervention? We drop the light levels and we tune the spectrum so that it's tuned to more short wavelengths, and that's what we did. The first study we started doing with aquarium lamps because nobody had those. It was in 2010, and LEDs weren't there, and we had to find something to do. We ended up using aquarium lamps, which were 9,000 K lamps. We dropped the light levels. Instead of having 1,100 lux at the eye, we had about 400 lux at the eye. And we gave them the light from the time they woke up until 6 p.m., and then we dropped that circadian stimulus to below 0.1 in the evening hours. We did things like in their rooms, we built these fixtures. These are mic stands with fixtures that we put on top of it with the aquarium lamps, because at the time we didn't have the fixtures. But we either put it on their rooms or we put it in places where they were going to spend most of their time. We saw a significant increase in their nighttime sleep, significant reduction in their depression scores, and a significant reduction in their agitation scores. Beautiful results, similar to what Van Sommering had shown. I mean, it works. It really works when you give lighting to older people. Now, one of the challenges we had is that a lot of the assisted living facilities, what they do is they say, we don't want people to be in the rooms. We want to keep them out. Okay, obviously retrofitting the entire common area would be ideal, but it's hard to do. So what we did is we built these light tables. These are actually TVs that we made them as light tables, and we now have people interested in building the light tables. And these are very, very bright light tables. Think about edge-lit TVs. Alzheimer's patients are sitting around tables most of their time, especially in common areas. They're either doing activities or they're eating. They're just sitting around tables. So it was a beautiful way to actually deliver the light. We saw a very significant effect, improvement in sleep efficiency, decrease in depression, decrease in agitation scores. We're now repeating the study. We have an NIH grant, which is a 5-year grant that we're running patients now on a short-term and a long-term study, and we're actually using more of the table and adding more subjects to it. These are our preliminary results from the current study that we're running. The short-term study, we have a baseline in what we call an active intervention, which is delivering a CS of 0.3 during the day and less than 0.1 in the evening. And then we have a washout period, and then we have another baseline, and we expose them to a placebo intervention. So it's basically we install lights, but the lights deliver less than 0.1 CS. So it's an inactive light, basically, but nobody knows what light is what, so it's just a way of us confusing people in terms of what experimental conditions they're getting. So this is Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. So a number above 5 means that the person has sleep disturbance. So they all start with close to 10. You see a significant drop in the active intervention, and there is a little bit of placebo, interesting enough, which is what you would expect, and that's why we're doing the placebo. But those are not significant, the only ones that are significant so far. I mean, we're still collecting data. This is, I think we have now about 45 subjects that we have collected, and we're gonna go up to 60 subjects on that. And then we're following them for 6 months. And the 6 months is obviously only the active lighting, because I don't think I can get Alzheimer's patients a whole year on the study. But you see that there's a continuous decline in sleep disturbances. So it works, and it works for long periods of time. So obviously, what you want is you want to have that lighting continuously in facilities like assisted living facilities. This is depression scores. You have a significant decrease with the active intervention. We're not seeing any placebo effect with the inactive intervention. And again, you see a significant decrease in their depression scores with time over the 6 months that we're collecting the data. And this is the agitation scores, where again, we're seeing a little bit of the placebo effect, but again, a significant effect with the active. The other one's not significant. And we're seeing less of a dramatic effect as we saw with depression, but we're seeing an impact on agitation as well. So it works. And there's no reason not to do that in assisted living facilities nowadays. I mean, what can go wrong here other than improve or do nothing, or like some people may not respond, but that's true with any medication or any treatment, okay? The other area we're working with is cancer patients. We're working with Mount Sinai. Bill Redd did this work here where he showed that giving breast cancer survivors, once they were done with treatment, you tend to have a lot of fatigue after treatment. So he was exposing them to 30 minutes of light in the morning. And he showed that he compared with a dim red light. He used those light boxes, those bright white light boxes that give over 1,000 lux at the eye. And he showed that there was a significant decrease in the depression score. So the fatigue scores is kind of reversed. So a lower number means you have more fatigue. I can't read. And what they saw was that a significant increase in the fatigue with the dim red light. Actually, it's the opposite. A higher, the upper numbers mean you are better in terms of fatigue. It's reversed. So the people that were exposed to the light treatment kept improving their fatigue rates. The people that were on the dim red light kept remaining fatigued, basically. The fatigue levels remained high. So we're now testing. This is a project we're doing, testing the use of light inside hospital rooms. So this is for bone marrow transplant patients. They have to stay in a hospital for about 2 weeks because they have their immune system completely compromised. So we're actually changing the lighting inside their room. So we added this light, and we are working with, again, Dr. Bill Redd to develop the CS of 0.3 from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. These are very sick patients, so we don't want to keep them in very, very bright lights all day. So we're giving them just that in-training stimulus. And we have preliminary results now from 12 subjects, significant improve in their fatigue rates with the active intervention compared to a placebo intervention. So it is working. Obviously, we're still collecting data, so there's more to come. Other applications include veterans with post-traumatic stress disorders. We're working with the VA doing that. We're working with the University of Michigan. They're looking at postpartum depression symptoms in people that have family history of depression. They tend to develop postpartum depression. So we're looking at a lighting intervention to help them with that. There's some work looking at delirium in ICU patients, as well as sleep and fatigue in Parkinson's disease patients, which is similar to what we're seeing with Alzheimer's disease. So I think that there are applications. The science is there. Do we know everything? No, we don't. But I think we know enough for certain applications to start using that science and applying it and collecting more data to see the benefits or not of these lighting installations. Now, in terms of the acute alerting effect, you can use a layer of light to add that acute alerting effect. So you do your CS to maintain entrainment, and then you can do a layer of light to increase alertness. We have done studies where we show that red light, which does not suppress melatonin, can reduce alpha power in the brain in the middle of the night. Alpha power is probably what half of you have right now when you're getting sleepy. You increase your alpha power. If I give you red light, the alpha power goes down. We saw that during the day, and we're currently actually with a project funded by NIOSH, we're currently doing that in the field, working with nurses in the field, testing out those red lights. Because you don't want to give nurses very bright light or blue light, because you don't want to suppress melatonin, because the suppression of melatonin has been linked to, obviously, diseases. So if you give red light, you're not going to suppress melatonin, but you're giving them that acute alerting effect that they're looking for, that cup of coffee. We saw the same effect during the post-lunch dip. So if you're going to attend a session around 2, 3 o'clock, make sure you get your red light goggles, because that will help you stay more awake and pay more attention to the. But we've seen an improvement in EEG, self-reports of alertness, as well as certain types of performance. And performance is more reaction times that we're seeing the effect. So how do you implement these things? I think you have to think about layers of light, okay? You may want to consider using things like blue or red light panels right at the desk if you can't change the ceiling lights. So that's a way for you to add that circadian stimulus without necessarily increasing your energy use as much, okay? And consider the use of red light as your cup of coffee or in addition to your cup of coffee. Now, we have done those patterns for healthy buildings where we try to implement these concepts into patterns to help you know what to ask for when you're doing the design. So feel free to go to the website. We did senior facilities, we did schools, and we're about to launch offices and healthcare. So at least it will help you. And we talk about timing, when to give light, when to remove light, what kind of light you can ask for, and so on. So just to summarize, light does promote entrainment to the local time on Earth. If you want to do that, blue light is your best bet. White light at higher light levels than needed for vision is needed, okay? So your threshold for activation of the circadian system is higher than for visibility. You can, in a night light, in the middle of the night, it doesn't have to be red. It can be warm color, white light. It's below threshold. You can see, but you're not necessarily activating your circadian system. Morning light is good, but it should be avoided in the evening and in the middle of the night. But you need to keep track of your total light exposures. And remember that light is also like a cup of coffee. So you can play with that as well to improve alertness in both daytime and nighttime. So with that, I do want to thank you. We have that information on the web. I guess this concludes the AIA, but I do want to do the acknowledgments. My colleagues at the Lighting Research Center and Gary for inviting me to be here. Our project sponsors, without them, I could not be standing here and showing all those data, so I really appreciate that. Our Light and Health Alliance, those are manufacturers that we're trying to translate the research. The work we're doing with Mount Sinai, it's actually Acuity built the fixtures for us, so they've been working very closely with us. We work with Ketra, USAI, Philips, Osram, Cree, GE. So they've been very good at us translating, and then they can develop the products and move on to the applications. And obviously our project collaborators, we work a lot with medical schools that allow us to have access to the clinical population. And thank you for your attention.